Well, good evening and welcome to the very first Story Bearer sessions. It's wonderful to be with you. These sessions are aimed to equip and inspire you to share your faith with your friends during coronavirus. My name is Phil Knox. I'm part of the team at the Evangelical Alliance.
And my name is Rachael Heffer. And again, I just add my welcome to you along with Phil. So why are we here? Well, we're here as the very first of what will be about an 8 or 9 week journey. And we really would love to invite you to join us for every single week of those at the same time, every Wednesday at 8 p.m. So what is it and who's it's for? Well, we would love to say that, as Phil said, this is about looking at how, particularly in this pandemic season, we as individuals can learn how to gently but courageously share our faith with the people around us. So if you're a budding evangelist, an old pro, somebody who overflows with grabbing those opportunities and enthusiasm for sharing Jesus at every opportunity, then this is for you. But my guess is for many of us, actually, we don't fit into that bracket, but it's also for you, very much so, for people who would say, actually, Jesus changed my life. I have something that I want to share with the friends and the family that I love, but actually most of the time I'd rather the ground swallowed me up because I don't have the words that I can find, or I'm scared of the tough questions. So it's for both of those sets of people, and you'll immediately know which of those two brackets you find yourselves in. So our invitation is to just say, join us on this journey together, starting tonight as we look to the weeks ahead. So Phil, tell us tonight, we enter week 8, unbelievably, of lockdown. How is it for you? And my question to you this evening would be, as you look at, even over the last week or so, what would you say, despite the challenges, what one thing would you and your family choose to celebrate at the given time?
Yeah, I found the start of lockdown really difficult, but gradually getting into a rhythm of coping with it, thriving in it, hopefully. I think the one thing I'd celebrate is loved the bank holiday weekends and just had I think my best day during lockdown was Friday. Had a lovely family day, which finished in the sun with a barbecue and a fire pit. That was a wonderful moment of joy in these challenging times. How about you, Rachael? How are you coping? What would you celebrate at this time?
Well, I was going to ask you, do you sing songs around your fire pit, or is it just...
Not quite. Maybe one day.
Work up to that. For me, yeah, equally. I think the sun of the weekend was a good tonic, wasn't it? It certainly makes these times of being at home more enjoyable. And I think, yeah, VE Day was just an amazing time, really, wasn't it? To remember kind of all that had gone before in wartime and people's courage and resilience. But personally, yeah, our family really enjoyed having a picnic with our next door neighbours, socially distanced, of course. But yeah, it was good fun. And realising that actually when we're in the busy pace of normal life, we just don't spend that time with those people, and it was really enjoyable. So yeah, more of that we should do post lockdown. So that was a good time. So tell us, Phil, obviously tonight we said this is the first of a few sessions. What have we got lined up, and moreover, are we going to be seeing joining us in the weeks to come?
So we've got a few ways of helping really explore this question of how we share our faith during coronavirus, and these sessions will form one component of that. We've got some fabulous guests joining us. We've got our friend Miriam Swanson, Nate Swaffield, joining us in a couple of weeks. We've got Les Isaac OBE, who founded Street Pastors, talking about kind of social action and evangelism and how they go together. We've got my friend Mark Greenwood, who oversees evangelism for the Elim denomination. We've got our boss, Gavin Calver, the chief exec of the Evangelical Alliance. We've got guests from Wales and Scotland providing insights from across the nation. And next week, really excited to let you know, we've got the evangelist Jay John and Sarah Yardley, who oversees Creation Fest in the UK. It's a fantastic lineup. We've got so much wisdom and more guests to be announced. So that's the first thing we're doing. And then the issues that we're looking at around evangelism. We're looking at kind of friendship. How do we become the very best friends we can be? We're looking at how prayer and evangelism are connected. We're looking at how we discover the story that we have. And we've got alongside that loads of stuff on the Great Commission part of the Evangelical Alliance website. And so as we go through these conversations, there's loads more content. There's videos, there's spoken word pieces. There are some articles to help you really engage and move forward with this. So please do connect with us. Follow Great Commission on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram to keep up to date with what's going on, and find us at eauk.org in the Great Commission section.
Brilliant. So that's all you need to know about how to stay connected with us during the weeks ahead, as we said. Phil, let's get stuck in then, because part of what we're hoping to do is not only have these discussions and welcome some amazing guests we look forward to having with us in the weeks to come, but also to really resource individuals so that we grow in that confidence together. Amazing stat, I think you mentioned in our launch moment last week, that came out from UK Gov, didn't it? Saying about 39% of us spending significantly more time usually online, obviously via Zoom with our friends, all getting Zoom fatigue. But what a significant statistic that 39% of us are spending so much more time with our friends. And so I guess part of our journeying and questioning discussions that we'll have be looking at is how do we make the most of those opportunities when we have that real care and compassion and love, genuine love for our friends, but actually connecting the dots between our lives, their stories, and God's big story. So as you said, a couple of resources, I guess, that we'll point to during the week before I'm going to quiz you with a few questions. There's two things really, mainly, aren't there? There's the Storybearer book, which those who know you, Phil, will know that this is the launch of a new book that Phil's written. And the reason we're flagging that mainly is because we believe that actually the content of the book, as Phil's just outlined, some of those key topics actually are really prevalent for this time. And so it's felt for us, hasn't it, Phil, as part of the Great Commission team, that actually we'd pluck out some of the wisdom in that. Some brilliant stories as well. You've made it really accessible and easy to read, Phil. But actually we'd love to encourage people to grab the book, read it, digest it, and just be well equipped moving forward. I know it embarrasses you when I say that, but it's genuinely a really good read. And not only that, the other resource will be our brilliant guests, because they will bring stories and experiences and honesty about the challenges that they've faced. So without further ado, we have a guest later on joining us, but just a few questions for you first of all, if that's all right. So we'll get stuck in. The second chapter in the book, first chapter is all about being a story bearer, isn't it? And the second chapter is about this word contagious, as you've called it. Maybe even maybe not the best, but certainly very topical at this time, as obviously we're in this horrible pandemic that we find ourselves in, which we know whilst has a devastating backdrop for so many of us as Christians and working with the church locally, nationally, actually the opportunities that it presents to us are just quite phenomenal. And there's been so many amazing stories already of seeing the church at large and us as individuals responding as God's people at this time. So my question to you would just be about this aspect of Christianity and what's contagious. What do you think it is about the Christian faith that makes it contagious?
I think, first of all, the chapter was written way before any mention of coronavirus, and so, but beautifully prophetic for this moment. But I think the Christian faith just is contagious, and contagiousness is a really helpful image when we think about the Christian faith. We think about how the Christian faith started. Jesus died, rose again, goes back up to heaven, Holy Spirit arrives on the day of Pentecost. You've got 12 fearful disciples whose leader has just been executed. Suddenly then 3,000 are added to them on the day of Pentecost. And today that 3,000 has grown to 2.2 billion people all over planet Earth who choose to say we are a follower of Jesus today. It's just the most contagious movement. They reckon by 2050 there'll be 3 billion Christians across the world. And it spreads, its contagious nature spreads life on life, friend to friend. The most effective person in sharing faith isn't a pastor or an evangelist or a church leader. The most effective person is a friend when leading someone to Jesus. And this contagiousness has two kind of aspects that we want to draw out a little bit today. First of all, potency. So when we're talking about this R number that the government are talking about, that's about potency. How powerful is the strain of the virus, but in this case, how powerful is the gospel? How much of a hold of our lives has Jesus got? And proximity, how close are we to those around us? And these story bearers are aimed at increasing both our potency as Christians, but also our proximity to others, that the good news might spread throughout those around us.
And in the book, you allude to chicken pox. I've got two little boys I remember very well when they both had chicken pox at a very young age, and so many friends were quite jealous that my children were going through it, because there's that sense of you want your child to get it and get through it and so on, and they talk of pox parties, don't they? But it's in that sense of proximity, isn't it, of drawing close to people and so on, like you said, and the potency as well within that. So what would you say, why is it that actually Christianity doesn't spread as quickly maybe as it could? And when we think about actually that's concept of proximity, are we not getting close enough to people, or what is that? Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, I think friendship is, even though we are more connected with people all over the world than ever before, I think that friendship's actually one of those things that's potentially under attack in our world. That actually, I don't know about you, Rach, but for so many of a lot of my kind of Facebook friends, I have acquaintances with them, and Facebook friendship is really easy. It's you kind of just click accept, and then you're friends with someone. But we all know that real friendship that goes really deep, is costly. There's a real cost to friendship, and in some friendships we go deep in our conversations about life, the universe, and everything, and talk about values. Some of our friendships we just talk about the kind of weather and the football and how things are going. And I think that relational stuff, we as Christians, I believe, should be the best friends in the world, and should be able to talk about things of meaning. I think one of those things about proximity is not only having really good friendships with people, but friendships that go beyond some of the more superficial conversations to stuff around values. In those kind of conversations, when people begin to see our heart and we be able to tell our story about what God has done, that can make a real difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that it makes a difference in people's lives. We know that for us as individuals, coming to faith and whatever that journey looked like has made a difference in our life. Why is it then, do you think, that we so often, not all the time, but so often find it really hard to then share it with other people? Again, in the chapter of the book, it talks about salespeople. And I know for me, I almost love nothing more than seeing somebody who really loves their job. I can think of, a few people on one hand who I think that I've met, and you just think, wow, whatever they do, you love it that they love their job because they come with that enthusiasm, and that is contagious, isn't it? Absolutely. So do you think there's something about our story, God's story in our life, that actually we undersell in some way? Why is it that sometimes we just don't feel almost excited enough about it to be able to have that overflow, that overspill into other people? What is it that holds us back?
I think we often will underestimate our power to make a difference in people's lives. I think that one of the key messages of today really is that we want to really say that all of us can play a part in helping people come to faith. If you're someone who follows Jesus, doesn't matter whether that's you've been following Jesus just for a few days or for many, many years, all of us can share our story and make a difference in people's lives. And I think a huge part of this is just being able to feel confident in being able to have the words to be able to say. And there's something about being confident. I remember flashbacks to exams, the difference of going into an exam where I was confident in knowing what I was talking about and what I was sharing was such a big difference to those exams where I kind of blagged the revision and hadn't put the time in. That confidence piece is really key. But I think I'd also say that it doesn't matter how long you've been a Christian. Certainly for me, I still get really nervous about sharing my faith with my friends because I really care about the relationship. I do get embarrassed. I do get scared about the cost of doing that. And as I really love to be loved. I like to be liked. And sometimes you can feel like, will this person still want to be my friend? And will they still value me in the same way? If I tell them a bit more about my kind of faith and what I believe and challenge them to think about that too. So I think that fear and that embarrassment for me, sadly, certainly hasn't gone away yet. So that's really, really natural. But that confidence in just being able to share a bit of your story and knowing that you have a part to play in that person journeying a bit close to Jesus can really, really help.
Yeah, brilliant. There's lots in what you said there. I think what I'd like to hone down on a little bit more is you just said right at the end there that there's that little bit of the story that you can share with someone else. I think for a lot of us, especially maybe those of us growing up in Christian homes or attending Sunday school or whatever, sometimes it feels like a big weight that when we have those encounters with people, whether they're really close to us or people that we have a chance conversation with on a train, we somehow seem to absorb this sense that actually we've got to take the moment and we've got to tell them the whole gospel, and this could be the one moment, and we sense that kind of weight of responsibility almost. But what you just said was actually it's about sometimes just sharing the little bits of your story. So in connecting that with the reality that for so many of us there's a real sense of embarrassment or fear or risk that we think, oh, we could damage this friendship, what would, from your experience, what would be your recommendation to people who just say, I'd love to share my story with someone, but I'm really scared of doing that? How do I even get started? Is it a case of rehearsing how we tell someone the whole gospel, or how do we connect just that little nugget, like you said, in someone's lives, do you think?
Well, let's not spoil everything tonight, Rach. We've got a whole series to unpack a load of that stuff. But in answer to your question, how we get started, for us this evening, what we really want to encourage each of us to be doing is just praying for a few friends. And so let's take that first step. If we're not yet praying for a few people to come to faith, that's our first challenge this evening. And so that the first thing, if you're watching this and want to ask the question, how can I begin to think about sharing my faith with my friends? Two really simple things off the back of tonight. Just begin praying for a few friends. Write a list, praying for them daily. And secondly, spend some time with them over Zoom, in whatever way you can legally, connecting with people, growing those relationships. That is the starting point. I believe that great evangelism doesn't start necessarily with a big platform moment. It starts with, let's begin to pray. And that's a real nice, easy start for us at the beginning of these stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant, Phil. Thanks so much for that. And we can see a couple of comments coming in. One from Jill saying, it's comforting to hear that you too feel nervous about sharing your faith with your friends. That's right. I think, Phil, sometimes people could look at you or others and say, well, it's all right for you, you're quite happy with sharing faith. But actually, as you said, we've all start somewhere, don't we? And it's often about asking those good questions of other people too, as Jill just said. So brilliant. Well, we're going to pause there just a second, just welcome our guest for this evening, which is John. I'll introduce him in a second. But just to say that, as we said earlier on, Phil, the source people is through the Story Bearer Great Commission and our wonderful guests. And so on that note, John McGinley, we are really happy to...
Thank you very much. It's great to be with you. So it's so good. Two of my favourite people in the world. It's great that I know you both. And yeah, thank you so much for the invitation.
You are very welcome. We're so thrilled to have you with us. Thanks for your time and joining us. Let me introduce you, John, to those who are joining us this evening. So John is on the leadership team of New Wine. He's also oversees the Archbishops College of Evangelists. And John, yes, I know John from him being the vicar of Holy Trinity Church in Leicester, which is where I grew up and was there from lots of about 18. And Phil, tell us how you and John know each other.
John and I met last summer at New Wine. We connected over a great love for faith sharing, but also for football. And John, before we get started, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, how would you feel if the season was cancelled right now, and why?
I'd be totally gutted. I've got two teams in my life, Liverpool and Leicester. They're both having amazing seasons. And which, for us to lose out on winning the championship and being in the Champions League, I would be so gutted. But yeah, I think I'm hopeful now. I think there are signs that we're going to finish the season.
Whereas as an Aston Villa fan, John,
that's right.
I don't care what happens so long as Villa stay up. So
exactly. Yeah.
John, just tell us a little bit about how you're faring through this lockdown life. How is it for you and family?
Yeah, I was interested that Phil said he struggled early on. I did too. I'm just a massive extrovert. And so for me, like, my brain is going, get me out of here. I just want to go somewhere else. And but it's been good. It's been good for us as a family. And we've been learning loads of new skills with technology. It's an incredible thing that God has done to upskill the church in a few weeks into this digital world. So I'm loving just exploring that as we're doing tonight. And to get me through the lockdown period, I hired a hot tub, and so that's my strategy for getting through lockdown is rent a hot tub.
There you go. As a result of Story Bearer sessions, hot tub rentals are going to go through the roof.
Yeah, seriously, people have said I've been more evangelistic about the hot tub than I have about Jesus during this time. So yeah, maybe you shouldn't have me on.
Like a very good way to detox from the millions of Zoom calls, which I imagine.
Indeed, yeah.
Oh, well, we wish every blessing to your family, obviously, during this time. But let us quiz you with a couple of questions we had for you, John. So
yeah,
Phil and I are talking about this idea of actually the Christian faith being contagious, and yet so often we struggle to get to a point where we allow ourselves almost to have that overspill of conversation about Christian faith with people. You for many years have been part of church and churches where actually you've seen, I'm sure, part of that wrestling actually for you as the heart of an evangelist, wanting to move a church and individuals forward into that greater confidence that Phil spoke of earlier. And I'm sure I've come across some of the tussles in how people engage with that or how they respond.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know from you, just if you could share maybe a little bit of your experiences on both maybe the church level, but also with individuals, and how you were able to journey alongside people who maybe, as Phil was saying, were fearful, embarrassed, risk of changing friendships and so on. How did you see people journey forwards in that?
Yeah, brilliant. So I had a moment about 6 years ago where we'd been following a really strong missional strategy, but we weren't seeing people come to faith. And I asked the leaders of our missional communities, how many of you have shared faith in the last year? And as broadly as we could define it, we said, have you shared a story, as we've just been talking about? Have you talked about the gospel? Have you apologetically sort of explained the relevance of Jesus to a situation? Have you offered to pray for somebody? And of these missional community leaders, about 80 of them, less than 20% of them had shared. And I literally went home and wept. I wept because these were our best Christians. And so I knew we were in real trouble. And I wept because I, as the leader of the church, had failed to equip them to be those witnesses, to be those missional disciples that they were called to be. So we went on a journey in which we discerned what it was that was the barrier. And we discerned two things. One was that there wasn't a daily compassion for the lost state of their friends. People didn't live with a longing for their friends to come to know Jesus, and they were honest enough to tell us that. And secondly, that they didn't feel they knew how to do it in our culture today. And so we went on a journey of teaching people around some tools around that. And the first one, which we can pick up in a bit, was pray every day for your friends to come to know Jesus. That will keep your faith alive. That will keep the compassion of God alive in your heart for your friends. And the second one was, here's a few tools. And I've got my copy of Story Bearer, fantastic book. But we trained people in just really simple things, which were asking questions, telling stories. And people weren't really happy to be trained, but we trained them anyway. And I remember Karen telling me, I'll do the training job, but I'll never, ever share my faith because I'm just not one of those Christians. And then she came to me one week and she said, John, you never guess what happened. Because you've been training us to pray for people out in the world. My colleague at work said to me what a rough time she was having. And I couldn't stop myself. I said, could I pray for you? And she said yes. And so I had to pray for her. And at the end of that time of short prayer, she was just crying quietly, saying, I've been asking God if he was there for the last 3 months. And now I know that he is. All because we'd got her praying for people and we'd given her a few tools on how she could get involved in a really easy way. And after the training, over 80% of these people had started to share. And so I realized that it wasn't an issue of there are certain Christians that can and certain Christians that can't. It was an issue of compassion and confidence. So we're not there yet as a church, but we're getting there, and we really do see people lead people to Jesus in their lives. And it's not just the professionals, the clergy, and the church workers. It really is the church beginning to be more confident in their witness.
Amazing, John. Can I just ask you, tell me about the length of that journey from the
moment
you identified that? How long did that kind of journey take? And give me the kind of that time. That'll be really helpful.
So the journey from that point of realization of where we were at to the point when we then trained and then we saw the change begin to happen was, first of all, my team actually said, okay, John, you have to do it first. So you ain't going to change the church unless you are living this out. And so they said, until you've got some stories of you witnessing, not as a vicar, but just as an ordinary person, then we're not going to let you train the church. So that was great, and that really did change me and really put me on my mettle, and that did change how I live my life day by day. So that was the accountability I need. Then we worked on some different tools as a staff team, and then about a year later we trained those leaders, and out of that they then had their testimonies, and then about 4 years into the process we then trained the whole church. So it was a 4-year process to go from realization to actually seeing the whole church begin to engage with these tools. So it's a really helpful question, because I think sometimes we just tell the end of the story, not just the journey.
Absolutely. And what would you say, from going back to, like you said, you as an individual and your personal experience, how many people would you say at any one time you feel you're praying for? And in the midst of that, again, over what period of time have you been praying for some of those? And do you regularly see encouragements, or has that been a long haul process for you, do you find?
Yeah, so I have a list of at least 5. So at Holy Trinity, we talk about, you pray for 5 and you find the one. So yeah, that's our phrase. So everybody's expected to pray for 5 people who don't yet know Jesus, who they have a realistic opportunity of sharing with. So I always say, my Aunt Jean in New Zealand, I pray for her, but she's not my one of my 5, because I don't get a chance to share with her regularly. So you pray for 5, and yeah, I've got people on my list. So Tony's been on my list for over 5 years now, and he's done Alpha. He's come to Tanzania with me. He's asked questions. I've prayed for him, and he's still not there. I know exactly what his issue is, which is pride. He knows that's his issue, and we talk about him. I talk to him about the fact I don't want him to go to hell, and we have a really honest, open conversation. But he's still not a Christian, and I pray for him every day. But other people I've prayed for, and they've come to faith really quickly. And so the thing that I've noticed, and that Holy Trinity has noticed, is when you start to pray, you discover that God creates the opportunities. It isn't just about you having to do it. So they change. Literally, people have said to us, I started to pray for my mum, and 2 weeks later, she comes and says to me, I realize I've never asked you what happens in your church. And they've not had a spiritual conversation for decades, literally decades. And suddenly they've prayed consistently and they've seen the answer. And so that's what we see as the difference. There's no guarantee of salvation, and there is a sense of being in the long haul. That's one of the things that you say in your book, Phil, is you've got to be in there for the long haul. And so don't expect this to be an overnight success.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can in those 5 years of people I've prayed for, I can name 3 that have come to faith in that time, as from me starting to pray for them and then them coming to faith. And others have changed and opened up.
Amazing. So it's about grabbing praying for people, and it's like grabbing the opportunities to then actually step out in faith and share something. What would you say to any individual who again says, but what words do I use? How do I get started? What would your encouragement be about how to connect the dots between what maybe one person is sharing, your friend is sharing with you, and as you're thinking what to share, how does that process work to even know what words to present to the person that you're chatting to?
I think some of the stuff is around having some stuff prepared. So I'd really encourage people not just to prepare their big story, but that's a really good thing to do. And if you've got a long-term friend, then who you've never shared that with, we encourage people at Holy Trinity just to say, do you know, I realized I've never ever told you about how I came to faith. Could I tell you that story? And so prepare your big story, but also just prepare little stories of what God is doing in your life as you go through life, and just look for the opportunity of trying to connect your life with your friend's life. We had an incident last week. I was doing training for 60 of our leaders on Zoom about mission and evangelism, and one person was saying, somebody's come to me and said, okay, Annette, tell me now, how do you make sense of this coronavirus and your God? She's completely stumped and she doesn't know what to say. And she comes back and she says, so can I have some help now? Because what we've told people to say is, do you know, I don't have an answer to that question, but I'm going to go and find out and I'm going to come back to you. So you don't have to be an expert. But genuinely, and I'm not just selling Phil's book for him, I really encourage people just to have little stories and to be intentional and to think, who could I share that with? Who could I tell that to? And somebody's asked a question on the chat, and how do you pray and it not become routine? I really encourage people to pray strategically and go, okay, so it's not just, oh Lord, please make them a Christian every day. It's, so where's Tony at the moment? And what can I do now, Lord? And what's happening in my life that I could connect with Tony? So you're being intentional in prayer first, so that when you're then in relationship with those people, you've already got a little bit of a spiritual sort of antennae about them, a sense of what might work. I remember when I was on mission, that I came back from a mission to a school governor's finance meeting that had to be rearranged because I couldn't make it. And I knew that they were going to ask me, how was your trip to Tanzania? So I came prepared with a testimony. I could have told them, okay, yeah, I had a good time. We went to some water projects. We helped some people that were poor and we did some training. But what I said to them was, do you know, it's amazing. Jesus healed some people and some blind eyes got opened, some lame people walked, some people got freed up from darkness. And it was just amazing to see what Jesus said. This is this finance committee with accountants and lawyers and all of this. And so they said, did that really just happen, John? I said, yeah, that's what Jesus does today. And they went, wow, I didn't know that happened. Mohammed, who was next to me, who's a counsellor in Leicester, said, I've got a problem with my leg that the NHS has not been able to heal for 3 years. And so he places his hand on me and says, I want to get well. And I said, okay, Mohammed, I'll pray for you. I'm a terrible Christian. I didn't pray for him at the end of the meeting because I had to get off to something else. A week later, he said to me, he said, since I touched you, I've had no pain.
Wow.
And then he said, I've got to meet you. I met with him. He said, how do I become a Christian?
Come on, fantastic.
And I'm not saying that I'm anything spiritual, but what I did was I prepared my testimony. I prepared my story. And I knew that they were going to ask me, because I was going into a meeting where they knew I'd been away. They're going to ask me, how did that go? So we all know that people will ask you, what do you do at the weekend? If God did something in church, then why don't we tell that story? Or people say, how's it going with your family? And I can tell the story of some of my family's real struggles. And we've had some really tough times with some of our daughters over health. And yet I can tell the story of how amazing Jesus has been for us in that. But that's because I'm ready and I've just prepared. So my encouragement is, when you're praying for people, don't just be praying, Lord, please make them a Christian. Pray about where they're at and what would make the difference. And then ask God, what's going on in my life that could connect with them, and prepare for that. You're looking to listen and connect with what where they're at in their lives, and see where your connection is with them.
Amazing.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, John. Absolutely wonderful to have you with us this evening. That's really, really helpful. We've covered more than we even intended to cover at the beginning of the season. It's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us. And that journey, I think what you've beautifully summed up, John, is that tension between this is a long haul thing which could take a lifetime in terms of praying for people. So your Mohammed story shows, doesn't it, how in an instant it can change. And I think managing those expectations with our friends is just so difficult. Over the coming weeks, we'll be talking a bit more about these aspects. But I guess our challenge this evening, we talked loads about prayer, for both what we've been sharing and John shared as well. If you don't at the moment have a list of friends who don't yet know Jesus, and you want them to, our encouragement to you this evening is to write down those names. And our experience, both from what John shared and our experience, is that you will begin to care more. Your level of compassion John put it will grow, but also things will happen in their lives. So please do begin to write down that list as a result this evening. And maybe this week you might start to drop them a text and just want to increase that level of friendship. We are so encouraged by this coronavirus moment that people feel, even though we are told to socially distance. I don't like the phrase social distancing. We are physically distanced, but actually communities are closer than ever. So that would be a great opportunity. Rach.
Well, all that remains to say, John, did you want to say anything particularly to close?
I would love to make a little shameless plug for a resource that I'm producing. So we have produced something called Mission Shaped Living. It's going to be published in July, and it's the content of all the training that we've done with Holy Trinity Leicester that's taken them on that journey. And so we're really excited that's getting published with New Wine and David C. Cook, and that'll be available in July for all the normal booksellers. And I don't get anything from that, but I just really am passionate about seeing people move from where they're stuck, not able to share, to being somebody like Karen, who suddenly is released into being what Jesus has called her to be. So thank you for allowing me to share that, Rachel.
Absolutely. No, that's brilliant. And I'm intrigued to look at that myself, having you've detailed the journey that both individuals went on, but also as a church community. So thank you. So all that remains to say is, John, huge thanks to you for joining us. Lovely to see you and great to hear
Thank
how
you.
family are as well. Our prayers go with you. Also to say to those of you listening back at home and hopefully comfortably getting into the rest of your evening, thank you so much for joining with us. We would love to, as Phil said right at the beginning, to ask you to connect with us during the week. Log on and like the Great Commission Facebook page. Take a look at the EA website, which has the Great Commission site embedded within it. There's articles and so on. And also, as Phil said, go to storybearer.com where there's videos and spoken word pieces that you can look at there too. Next week, we've got an amazing week lined up again, haven't we, Phil? Tell us who we've got coming to join us.
We've got the amazing Sarah Yardley, who is just a great friend, oversees Creation Fest in the UK. She is amazing. We can't wait to hear from her. And evangelist J. John, who has a massive international ministry, has written some brilliant books around evangelism. And so fabulous to have both of those guys joining us and taking this a little bit further.
Brilliant. So don't miss that. We'll say goodnight to you from here on in, but please come and join us next Wednesday at 8 p.m. We'll probably be in the same time, same place. So come and join us then. Thanks for joining us tonight. God bless. We'll see you soon.
Thanks so much. God bless.